My name is Yonason. I am also known as the Ethics Ninja. And the best advice that I ever got is never go anywhere without something to say. As a community rabbi, I would be asked from time to time to speak, sometimes on very short notice. As a teacher, sometimes I would be asked to fill in for a class that wasn't necessarily my field of expertise. And as a professional speaker, sometimes it happens that all of a sudden I'm needed. And to always be prepared, to always have in mind an idea, something that's relevant, something that's compelling, something that will hold people's interest. I've acquired a reputation in my community as someone who always has an idea on the spot. And it's not because I'm brilliant, it's because I'm prepared.
Wow, that's awesome. That is awesome, Yonason. So how did you learn that? Who told you that? When did you get that?
I was in a rabbinic training program in Israel, and our scheduled speaker didn't show up. So they ran into the office and they got the dean of our program, and he stepped in and he looked around the room. He said, "This is a good example of a situation in which you may find yourselves as a community rabbi being asked to speak on short notice." He looked around the room again, he smiled, and he said, "So who's first?"
Wow. Were you first?
I was not first, but I was among those who volunteered. I figured this is a good, safe place to try this out. But I really took that lesson to heart. And this is really what the difference between teaching and mentoring. Because he could have given us a lesson. Okay, now here is a good piece of advice. Always have something ready to say. But by actually requiring us, collectively to step forward, that's what made that message so compelling, and it has served me well.
Wow. Wow. That is such an interesting point of view there that, he could have told you the lesson or he could have had you experience the lesson. And now you're sharing the lesson some 30, 40, 50 years later, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. I love that. Well, around that, right? Leaders struggle with the same things, right? Sometimes crazy things happen. I mean, we're in the middle of some interesting times right now, and leaders need to be even more clear in their communication and even more clear in what they do. So how do we prepare for that tragedy when things happen, Yonason, that we can't expect to happen, or they're even more than we expected?
Yeah, well, what's the line from Shakespeare? I think it was used in one of those girly movies my daughters used to watch when they were very young. Some are born to lead, some are chosen to lead, and then some have leadership thrust upon them. I think that's something like that. And there is an element of leadership that I think is inborn. When you look at some of my political heroes. Harry Truman is one of them. And even though I live in St. Louis, I grew up in Los Angeles, so it wasn't a local connection for me. But Truman was a person of extraordinary personal integrity, and no one ever expected him to be president of the United States, including himself. He had no presidential aspirations. He was a captain in World War One, I believe, and that connection got him into a political organization that he started off as a local judge, and then he eventually became a senator. And Franklin Roosevelt chose him as vice president for his fourth term because he was the only safe choice. He was the only one that Roosevelt could use to consolidate his base and get enough support. And a few months after the election, Truman found himself president. They called him his accidency.
Wow.
And when he left office, he had trouble getting reelected or renominated even. When he left office, he had one of the lowest approval ratings in history. And now historians regularly rank him among the 5 best presidents ever, which teaches you a whole bunch of things about leadership, doing what's popular, doing what's recognized in the moment is often not the right thing. Making hard decisions, being willing to stand by your guns, stick to your guns, stand by your principles, um, and having that long view, being willing to be unpopular. Now, I mean, put this in the context of our politics and of some business decisions. The willingness to be unpopular, to do what needs to be done for the benefit of everyone. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we had
Wow.
a few more leaders with that kind of courage and vision and integrity? I mean, you look at Truman's career as president, he faced more crises and more difficult decisions than pretty much any other president. And historians believe that he got virtually all of them right. And that's not even the point. The point is that he met them with integrity. And that's what we need from leaders.
Wow. So, how do we do that when we're measured quarter to quarter, year to year, term to term, if you will? How do we continue to take that long view, even when we know that if we don't get reelected, we don't keep the position, that frankly maybe our influence is going to end?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it has so many different applications. I mean, as a speaker and a trainer who talks about ethics, and who I firmly believe good ethics is good business. At the same time, there are plenty of topics I would like to talk about that I don't or rarely do because I know that they are so inflammatory and so incendiary that I'm going to lose at least half the audience just by raising the topic. Because I tend to be a moderate, I'm likely to lose all the audience. So I'll get people on both sides angry at me. I mean, certainly what's going on right now in Israel. There's overwhelming support for Israel internationally, but there are also voices saying things that I personally find not only incomprehensible, but reprehensible. And I've spent much more time on LinkedIn talking about politics because I feel I have a moral obligation to do that. This is my community. I have a son who was on vacation with his fiance in Israel for the holidays, and he was called up. He's now on the northern border, hoping that Hezbollah do not come across in an attack. These are difficult times, and to have moral clarity, to have historical awareness, to have intellectual integrity, to be able to see that there may be two sides to the issue, but those sides might not be equal or equivalent. And to be able to engage civilly, respectfully, authentically, and by authentically, I mean, don't resort to slogans. Don't resort to platitudes. Don't resort to party sound bites. Those do nothing to advance a discussion or dialogue. They do nothing to bring us closer to resolution. There has to be a sincere desire to address what the problem is and try to find a viable solution that as many people as possible can live with. And we just don't see enough of that anymore. Everything's posturing. Everything's trying to score points. And what you mentioned before, benchmarks, quarterly earnings, the short-sighted views that we end up sabotaging our own long-term success because we're trying to gain recognition in the short term. It's foolish.
and maybe there's not an answer to this, but I mean, how do we do that, Yonason? How do we shift? How do we make that shift from quarter to quarter, sound bites on, Twitter X, on Threads, on LinkedIn? How do we start that? I mean, does it start with you and me having a conversation? And by
Well,
you
yeah,
and
I was
me, I
gonna
mean,
say, yeah. It starts right here. I mean, that's what we're doing. And while we may not, I don't know about you, I do not have an audience of millions following
me
my
either.
every word, but I get such encouraging comments from the relatively modest following that I have, that they really appreciate a voice of reason. On my podcast, Grappling with the Gray, which, since you invited me to do this, is also the
Your new book.
um, title of my book. It's all about looking at issues from both sides and trying to develop a complete representative view of the whole picture before starting to advocate for one side or the other. And every week I invite on 3 guests, and we take on a topic that's in the news often, or just a theoretical, sometimes real business scenario, and try to see it from every point of view. And frequently, I will come away with insights I did not have before the program. My guests have frequently said that. Sometimes I'll have guests that'll really square off against each other. But so far, it's always been respectful. It's not cable news, and it's not meant to be. I'm not interested in gladiatorial combat or bringing pit bulls onto the screen. Let's try to examine this and see what the angles are. And if we can do it on this level, I think that there is a real desire among most people to find solutions, to find rapport, to find common ground, and not to simply try to beat the other side into submission. Unfortunately, it's a lot more exciting to watch people beating each other over the head. And that's what gets ratings, and that's why cable news does it. So we have to be entertaining too. Because we have to be engaging. We have to make people want to be part of this conversation. So they'll say, you know what? It might be fun to see the blood and guts on cable news, but I'd rather do something that's a little more beneficial for myself, for my mind, for my soul, for my heart, and for my prosperity in general.
Yeah. Well, and for our legacy, to that point, right? I mean, I don't, I think people forget that the internet is new, but yet it's going to be forever. I mean, Chat GPT ingests everything. And so eventually those old craziness things are going to resurface. Those things are going to come up, and you're like, oh geez, did I really say that? Was that really my point of view? And I think that's so interesting because, to your point about the short view, 3 seconds, 30 seconds can live forever. And yet we forget that, and we miss that, and we find ways maybe to ignore that or not care about that, perhaps because we believe that it doesn't matter. But I'm with you, Yonason. I think it does matter. I think it matters a lot that we have to stand up for what we believe is right. And as leaders, we have to help people along that way, right? Leaders are, you mentioned our friend Cy Wakeman said, leaders are translators, right? Leaders are linguists. So how do we, as leaders, how do we help translate something that can be very volatile into something that is more helpful?
Yeah, well, you go back in literature, and you find one of the famous soliloquies from Shakespeare is Mark Antony, when he says, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come not to praise Caesar, but to bury him." The brilliance of that opening of course, many people haven't read the whole speech or don't know the play, so they're not quite sure where it's leading. Um, Mark Antony is facing a crowd of Romans who turned against Caesar and who celebrate his death. And Mark Antony was an ally. And these people are highly suspicious of him. So what does he do? Friends, Romans, identity, countrymen, nationality. Lend me your ears, please. Hear what I have to say. I come not to praise Caesar. I'm not here to do what you think I'm here to do, merely to bury him, just to afford him the final dignity. And where does he go from there? He gradually shifts into a recounting of what Caesar did for the Roman Empire. Whether accurately or not, that's not our topic here. But by the end of his speech, what he's done is he has rallied this entire crowd to go after Caesar's assassins and bring justice to them. He changed the hearts and the minds of a crowd that wanted nothing to do with him or what he had to say. And so, again, the cable news approach of come out with guns blazing, attack the other side, make them look ridiculous, call them names. It's entertaining. It's not helpful. If I can demonstrate to you that I respect you, that I respect your opinions, that I understand you, and there's a critical point. I have to listen to you, and then I have to let you know that I've heard you by saying back what you've said. And then maybe you'll be willing to listen to me and to give me a fair hearing. Now, leaders have to constantly earn and re-earn trust. It comes with the language they use, their consistency, their transparency. So I was just writing this for a column. When your 3-year-old says why, the right answer might be because I said so. Because at 3 years old, you can't really sit down and have a fully reasoned conversation. If you're still using that answer at 13 or 20 or 30, it's a big problem. It's not going to work. So when leaders say, trust me, if they haven't already earned that trust, they're not going to get it.
Mm. Well, you said a big word there that I think a lot of leaders miss on, and that starts with C. That's consistency. Consistency, right? In the little moments, in the big moments, being consistent. So where does one start with consistency? Where do we begin at the beginning, if you will, Yonason, so that we can make sure that we're laying the foundation for trust, for ethics? Where do we do that?
Well, first with expectations. If my wife and I have been married for 35 years, and she's probably not going to listen to this. So, but it's a common stereotype. But I've certainly experienced that there's much truth to it. That women often expect men to be mind readers. Of course, sometimes we expect them to be mind readers also. So it does cut both ways. But that makes relationships a lot harder. I think that it was the lawyer Jerry Spence. He said, "My dog doesn't play games. My dog lets me know exactly what it wants." Maybe that's why so many people love dogs. there's no everything. It's all transparent with dogs. You know exactly what they want, and you know you never have to guess. And if I hire you to do a job, or if I join forces with you to do a job, we're partners, we're colleagues, we're collaborators, um, and I don't make clear to you what my expectations are, I'm sabotaging our efforts. If I hire you to work for me and I don't give you the training you need, I don't give you the resources you need, I'm setting you up for failure, which means you're going to resent me. You're not going to trust me, and for good reason. If I give you instructions that are not clear and you make a mistake, maybe you do exactly what I said, but not what I meant, and then I blame you. Or even if I don't blame you, but it keeps happening. I mean, nobody wants to be in this kind of environment because they feel that it's an environment they can't work. When Pharaoh enslaved the Jews in Egypt, he made the men do women's work and the women do men's work, and that may sound a little bit politically incorrect for our times, but what the sages are telling us when they teach us this is that he made the people do jobs they weren't good at because he wasn't just interested in their productivity, he was interested in destroying their spirit. And when you give somebody a job and you don't position them to succeed in that job, they're going to be miserable. They're going to be resentful. They're not going to trust you. And they're either going to do the job poorly or they're going to want to get out, or both.
Wow. And yet that is exactly what so many leaders end up doing is they don't give clear directions. They don't set clear expectations. They expect mind reading. And frankly, they don't provide clear feedback. So the problem continues. So if we flip that over to be a good leader, clear expectations help, right? Setting, real feedback, not just, hey, attaboy, attagirl, real feedback, and then letting people work within their areas of strength. Am I hearing that right, Yonason?
Yeah, and what you said about feedback is also worth clarifying. Specific, personalized feedback. There's a new phrase they've got: feed forward.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need that or not, but it's the concept of it. Right? Personalize the recognition. People like to be praised, but they want to be praised for something that they deserve. I was at a little bit of a digression, but National Speakers Association, we bring in guest speakers to our local chapters every month. So I brought in a speaker. She was excellent. Right at the end, she said, "I'd like a volunteer," and nobody stepped forward. So usually, if no one else steps forward, I'll do it just because I don't want to leave the speaker hanging. But some little voice in my head said, "Don't." And I didn't. And finally, somebody else came forward. And the speaker told us, "Now, I want you to stand up and give her a standing ovation." And we did. We clapped, we cheered, we whistled. And the speaker said to the member, "How did that feel?" "Oh, it felt great." And I thought, I'm so glad I didn't step up. Because why do I want a group of people cheering me for doing nothing? It would have felt embarrassing. And when she asked me how it felt, I would have had to lie to not deflate her whole point, which was a good point. We need recognition. But that recognition has to match the accomplishment. Right? It's like the culture: give everybody a trophy, give every student an A. Don't have winners and losers. It's coming from a good place, a well-intentioned place, but it's not addressing reality. Again, it's that short-sightedness. Let's make people feel good now. And in the process of doing that, we deprive them of the tools so that they can feel good about themselves later when it really matters, when they're really making a difference.
Wow. Wow. There's a lot there to unpack. I just want to unpack a little bit of that around the whole trophy thing, because I agree with you. Giving everybody a trophy, the same trophy, you give nobody a trophy. Nobody wins with that. The best that I've seen, though, good leaders find something to praise each person with specifically. And that makes all the difference. And I don't think at all that you weren't saying to do that, but I think sometimes those get conflated, and people think they're the same, when in reality, I mean, yeah, I don't want a participation trophy. There's no accomplishment there. But absolutely, if I did something well, I'd like you to say that. I like that communication, that feedback, feed forward, whatever you want to call that. Am I right in saying that?
Oh,
Or
yeah, absolutely. And we need that. I need it. You need it. If I've done something really well and nobody notices, I have the self-satisfaction of knowing I did a good job. But I would also like the people who benefited from what I did to acknowledge that they in fact benefited. And that's also part of trust. I put my effort into this. I put my talents into this. I put my experience into this. I produced something or provided something of value. And why shouldn't I be acknowledged for that? And that's the job of leaders. There's an article I saw recently. It said, um, good leaders praise their people in front of other leaders, in front of other seniors. Uh, you know, a guest at a high-ranking executive comes into the office and says, "Let me tell you what Fred, what Susie just did this week." It means so much more. Give the credit, share the credit. Let someone else have the spotlight for something that they earned, and position people so that they will earn it. I remember when I was teaching, there was an awards ceremony at the end of the school year. And there was one student, very, very bright, hardworking girl. And she was getting award after award after award. Now, yeah, she earned them. And I don't remember what they were, but there were some of them that I felt could have authentically been given to a different student to spread the recognition around. Um, because sometimes, can you imagine um, if you're the second best basketball player on Michael Jordan's team? Uh, like nobody knows who you are. Nobody's talking about you. You're pretty important too.
absolutely.
In basketball and hockey and certain other sports, they rate the assists as well as the goals or the scores, because the person who's positioning the star to be a star is just as important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Finding ways to authentically recognize is a great hallmark of a leader. So let's as we take this home, Yonason, let's talk just a little bit more about the gift of communication and how leaders can really hone in on this and give that. So if a leader is struggling with that now, if they're struggling with being a good translator, a good linguist, a good communicator, where would you recommend they start?
Um, One good place to start is to ask questions. When you don't know what to say, ask a question. And, we were talking about Cy Wakeman. She's a master at this. A person comes and starts venting. So, what's your solution for addressing this problem? How would you like to address this problem? What can you do? And very often people will then back away. They're not really looking for solutions. They just want to vent. Now, sometimes we need to vent. Other times, venting just makes things worse. Because the more I complain about it, the more worked up I get over it. But to try to always channel or steer the direction in a positive, along a positive vector, or sometimes to explain. I mean, to empathize. Empathy is good. Right? It's my acronym for ethics. Empathy is the E. It starts right there. Let people know that, okay, maybe they have a legitimate complaint. Maybe they're absolutely right. Maybe there's no good solution right now. Saying, listen, I understand what you're saying. We just don't have the means of addressing this right now. But I understand completely where you're coming from. And I really appreciate your willingness to work through this. We're all trying to pull together. I'm certainly open to suggestions on how we might be able to improve the situation. And and I will look for opportunities to try to address your concerns. Now, again, if that's as far as it ever goes, if there's never, I worked for a principal once, and every time we came to him, he always had the same responses. There's a bigger picture here. And it became a joke among the teachers. And so did he. Because you knew whenever you went to talk to him about something, that's what you were going to hear. There's a bigger picture here. And, well, if you're the only one who can see it, maybe there's something wrong.
Yeah, that's funny. That level of consistency is not what we're looking for. We're looking for consistently positive behavior. And with that, Yonason, you mentioned your book, Grappling with the Gray. It's available, folks, at ethicsninja.com. Yonason has a great podcast as well you want to tune into. Get connected with Yonason. Learn from him. Learn how to grapple with that gray and how to be a better communicator and how to find the middle, even in hot situations, which is something that I always value about you, Yonason. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, Phil. Thanks so much.
Thank you.